Hi. So my name is Joris Peels, and I have the honor of leading this first panel for you today. And we've got a bunch of wonderful panelists for us today, and we're going to talk about sustainability. And we hope to get a real discussion about sustainability, why it's important. We'll talk a little bit about how do we tackle sustainability as an industry, but also as individual companies. And we also talk about like what's real about sustainability, because sustainability used to not be very far from people's press releases, but very far from day-to-day operations. So how do we change that to make it a practice? How do we change this to make it something that we do day after day? Now, with me today, we've got Stefanie Brickwede, who is the head of additive manufacturing at Deutsche Bahn. And she's also the managing director of AMGTA, which is a collective of people that are helping mobility and medical and lots of other things besides go additive. So I'd like some applause for Stefanie, please. Thank you, Stefanie. Then also we have Markus Glasser, who is the EMEA VP of a company called AOS. AOS is a company that makes laser sintering machines. You may have heard of them. Thank you for coming here today, Markus. Then we've got Sherri Monroe, and Sherri is the Executive Vice President of the Additive Manufacturers Green Trade Association, a trade association that is hoping to get us all to become members and become green together. Then we've got Frank Beckmann, who is the head of, he's the head of, one of the heads of IAPT, and a researcher in the field, and thank you very much today for Frank. And then we have the last person, Carina Lebsack, who is the head of corporate sustainability at Würth Group. Thank you very much, Carina. Okay, guys, so I just want to ask, I'm going to start by just asking everybody questions specific to them first a little bit, and then we're going to go a little bit further into some more discussion elements. So we'll start with, well, first let's start with Carina here. Hi, Carina, welcome. I'd like to know, like, well, so AM sustainability is important to us, but AM is just this really small part of Würth Group. So how do you think that additive manufacturing sustainability in AM is going to help Würth Group?
Yeah, nice question. We at Würth, we are facing challenges ahead as every one of you, and we are driving towards a circular economy, because the way we do business at the moment is not the way we can do business in the future. We have only these materials in our earth, and we need them for products, so we need new technologies, new solutions, that we have the resources for the future production. And therefore we are looking for new technologies. We would like to help our customers. We are very customer orientated and curious, and that's why I'm here also today, to learn from you guys, and hopefully you all can learn also from another perspective.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And so another question then for, I think for Stefanie, it's a similar question, and that is that, well, okay, for Deutsche Bahn, gigantic enterprise, right? Can AM help make Deutsche Bahn, this really small part, can that help make Deutsche Bahn more sustainable in some way?
Definitely. I mean, the railways, as well as Deutsche Bahn, consider themselves as the most sustainable transport mode in general. But of course, we have to take a closer look that we keep this distance also to other transport modes. And so we decided that additive manufacturing is the technology to use less material and to just produce when you need those parts. And that is really crucial for us. And so we defined a strategy that by the year 2030, we want to have at least 10% of all parts just in a digital warehouse. Little joke, I was asked by a journalist if we could provide a photo of a digital warehouse. So some people still have to get the story. But this is our strategy. And so we don't want to have everything on stock anymore, and we want to use the big advantage of additive manufacturing, just produce in the moment I would need the parts, and that is one of the big sustainability aspects, no overstocking anymore.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Stefanie. So Markus, like famously, EOS now works for this responsible manufacturing as an ethos, as a slogan. Does that mean we all have to print less, use our AOS machines less? What does that mean? The responsible manufacturing.
Well, I mean, this would be, of course, idle if we produce less or nothing, because then we definitely have no CO2 emission, right?
Yeah.
But let's make it a bit more realistic. So let's reformulate and let's say we produce what we need. And if you now look in the terms of responsible manufacturing, how we describe it, that we want to accelerate the world's transition to responsible manufacturing with industrial 3D printing, that it means we have two levels. On the one hand side, we have this topic design, so responsible design, where we talk about purpose-driven design, where we talk about integration, functionality in a part. I mean, we have yesterday in the innovation stage, we got a good speech from Just Air Tech, where we could learn how to design an air cooling system with an additive designed heat exchanger. So this gives you the idea, what can you really achieve, in terms of integration, functionality, in reducing of energy consumption, in this case, in reducing of production, in reducing of waste. So there's a lot of abilities. Of course, lightweight is another layer. But on the other hand side, if you take this one, then you have, of course, also to think about customization. Take this eyewear frame, which is, of course, personalized. It means also we need less, very likely less stocks. We have, of course, also the idea that we have less waste. We can maybe have even a longer lifetime. And then we come to the responsible value chain. And that means we have, of course, on demand, and this is, of course, very important what you also said, or decentralized production, because then, and this is, of course, come back to your first question, then we can just produce the parts we really need. And that means we have no issues on the warehouse. We have not an overloaded warehouse. We have less space. So, of course, this gives us a lot of room to show that additive can help the whole topic CO2 emission, the whole topic energy reduction. And of course, at the end, if you bring it to the end, then we have the circularity, which is super important, that we think, how do we approach now together in additive this topic responsible manufacturing? Because we need to look on the material side. So we have to, in our case, if you look on the polymer printing, we need to work on sustainable parameters where we reduce the refresh rate, for instance, that we also think the sourcing of the material, that the using of the material, that we also think about at the end the application through. So there's a lot of things what we can do, and this is a big picture, and I think probably what I told you now you have heard before many times, but always we should think, what does it mean for us? What can we change in the world, and what can we change with our initiatives, with our technology, with our industry here to make a better life for all of us?
Thank you. And speaking of that, you mentioned the value chain. I think we talked. Frank was very interested in that. If we talk about the value chain, one of the things that really comes up in sustainability is always talking about CO2 and CO2 emissions and CO2 emissions in a part. But also, there's more than just a part. There's this whole value chain. How do you think that?
Yeah, I think these are the two aspects of the part itself, where we have a big benefit if we do a lightweight design. So we started already 15 years ago, designing first lightweight parts, topology optimized for the aircraft industry. So of course there we have the biggest impact on the CO2, that's clear. But also with our customers, we work on the whole process chain. First we have to check where are the potentials within the process chain. I think it's not yet clear for every applications. So there we get all the numbers, we measure how much energy or how high the energy consumption is within the process chain, and then we work on that, on strategies how to improve that. For example, so the biggest, one big point is that we really get stable processes. So at the moment, first time right is not always the case. So if we get stable processes, we produce less weight and have a benefit in CO2. And there are many more small topics where we can tackle the CO2 footprint of the whole process chain.
Okay, and then a little bit back to Sherri, a little bit how do we do this together? Because you're essentially a trade association with the name green in it. So how do we actually make, besides just having like a talking shop and talking with each other, how do we actually take something like this, like an idea like this, and how do we actually implement it as a group, as an industry, collectively?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important part. Obviously, the collaboration, companies working together, regardless of the size of the organization, no one company is going to be able to do this themselves, really to be able to move this forward, really expand the market. As we all know, AM is a very small part of overall manufacturing, so really working together to expand the market is really going to be important. But I think coming together around concepts like that and really being able to explore them together and create, a common language and a common way to be able to push this forward, I think is going to be really important. And that's what we're trying to do globally, and around the world. It's a slightly different conversation here in Europe versus, for example, in the US. So really putting that together is critically important. And I think looking at and being able to talk about the entire value chain, you're talking about overstocking, whether you're talking about the production, the part-for-part comparison, if you're talking about the ripple effects of what does it mean to lightweight, and then what does that do to the rest of the process. And exploring that entire conversation, I think, is really important, and really understanding, regardless of where you are in the value chain, even if your process has maybe a bigger CO2 impact, understanding how that fits into the overall process chain is really important to really be able to push this forward.
Okay. I think a good place to begin here, because I don't know if you're a lot of you are German, so you've probably you've sat through a sustainability panel before. And usually it's a lot of people agreeing with each other. Oh my God, yes, that's such a good idea. Oh, I agree. We at X company agree with this as well. But what I always find is the really difficult thing is, so, what are we working towards? Like, sustainability seems almost like my idea to go to the gym. I want to go to the gym, right? I want to, and then I don't do it, right? But my soul is pure, right? And I talk about it a lot, but I do it less. So, and that's the same thing I think with sustainability. So, for this, like, how do we measure success? Or how are we actually, if we're going to get somewhere, the goal is more sustainable. I understand. We all understand. More than now. But how do we measure success and sustainability? Is there an end goal? Is there like a metric? Is there a KPI? Does anybody have any ideas on something like that?
Well, I think it's a really broad subject, right? It's sort of like saying AM, thinking that suggests one thing. Every company here is doing something slightly different, so it's a very broad subject. And I think for every company, I kind of look at the industry in two sections, right? There's the technology developers, and then there's the technology users that are trying to do something within their business and using AM to do it. And so, what they're trying to do, it's going to be very specific to their industry, depending on the technology that they're using and where the sustainability is going to come from. Is it in reducing your energy consumption? Is it using less material, creating less waste? Is it reducing overstock and inventory? Is it pushing production closer to demand, where you're not having to guess what demand is going to be? So for everybody, it's going to be a slightly different measure, what they're looking at. And so I think it's important to talk about, we talk about sustainability in a very broad stroke, and that does make it very difficult. It's like, oh, let's all get more fit. Like, what does that mean? And you really have to look at the specific use cases and understand that, and understand where your process is, where you're trying to go, and where your opportunities are, right? Like, go for the easy wins first, but then keep going. And if you're not sure where those are, try something, go for it. I'm always very hesitant to use the term greenwashing, not because it doesn't happen, but sometimes what one person perceives as greenwashing is just somebody else's first steps, right? You're going for the easy wins first. Start there, and then just keep going. And let's encourage everybody as they're moving in that direction. And some things they do are not going to work, right? This is an innovative space. We're all in innovation. That by definition means it's not always going to work. But let's keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. greenwashing is good. People, you heard it here first. Remember?
Just keep going.
It's close. But yeah, Stefanie, you had a point to make. Yeah.
I mean, the KPI question is really, really interesting. At Deutsche Bahn, we are just about to start a new program. Big corporates do this from time to time, and the umbrella is becoming more sustainable. And we also brought in a project from additive manufacturing.
Yeah.
And then we were asked, what are your KPIs?
Yeah.
And there is not one KPI, to be honest. It's a bit emission saving, yeah, but in trains it's not that easy like in aviation. Because if you save 1 kilo of weight over a lifetime of 25 years of an average plane, and so it's quite simple. In trains, sometimes you really need weight, yeah, for going on the tracks. So that's not that easy. So we had really to think about, and we still do, so if you have any solutions, please address me, I would be happy, how to work on those KPIs. And one KPI, to be honest, is also money, also in the sustainability effect. If we can bring short-term effects in money, and there are big ones, I already talked about overstocking or less overstocking. Just imagine if you print 10% of the parts when you need them, that's pure cash out. That is definitely not just sustainable, it's also money. I'm an economist, I'm not an engineer. So, and coming back to the sustainability effect, if you think about what you could do with that money, and I just want to give you a short glimpse. Deutsche Bahn has spare parts just for the rolling stock, not talking about infrastructure, worth 600 million euros a year. At least that was my information until 2 weeks ago. And then I had a talk with our CEO. And I showed him a big part which we had printed the sand mold for, big effects. And then I told him about the 600 million euro, and he said, no, you're wrong. And if you are facing your CEO who tells you you're wrong, it's like, no, it's not 600 million, it's 1.1 billion. Oh, wow. So the effect is even bigger.
100%.
And he's a former CFO, so he got really caught in with that information. Yeah? And if you think about what you could do with the money, if you just want to plant trees or whatever, yeah, that is also a big effect. So we are working on a whole bundle of KPIs at the moment.
Okay, I think that's fine. And I want to ask a question, Carina. Like, you're the lone kind of like, well, you're a professional in a big company working in sustainability. How do you measure like your own success in that organization?
Yeah. We started, first of all, we need the aim. What's the aim of sustainability? This was a big question, and for us it's to become circular. So we said goodbye to the linear system, and we want to be an enabler to drive the circularity forward. So what do we need for this? We have 3 themes. We have the climate, the materials, and the material life cycles, and the social standards. And in these 3 themes, we try to get a transparency. But to be honest, we need the data, and this is a big, big part. Everyone is collecting data, and no one knows why and for what. So we are also collecting data, but it's more important to get a common understanding. What is sustainability about? What were you talking about? And for me, it's always the same. We didn't bring the corporate balance sheet in 1 or 2 days. It was a really, really over years a development. And we need the same in sustainability. We need the discussions. We need the same understanding. Otherwise, we will talk in different directions. And for me, it's not talking about less and less. It's about talking how can we change the things, because the reason why we are here with all the issues and challenges is why we did the things like we did. And I won't say it's bad, really not. Really, really good things. But we have to change like humans and look into the future, how can we change the things? And speaking directly, taking the resources from our earth, making a product, and don't think about what we are doing after the usage doesn't make any sense, because when we wasted this and burned them, they're gone. And if you look on the earth like a warehouse, and at Würth we are often looking into our warehouses, and we are all happy when they are full. Not too full, but they should be full so that our customers have the products whenever they need them. But if we not are able to refill our warehouse with the resources, then everyone in this room is not able to produce any product. And this is why we should think about how can we bring the materials into life cycles that we can use more often or often and often again.
Okay, so that's a good point. I think it leads us to a nice little venue for more discussion. I mean, I think circularity buzzword, but to implement it, well, we can do it in additive. We can take the powder bed fusion powder, we can make filament out of it, make parts with material extrusion. We could manage that then, and then if that part's recycled, we can make it into a less critical part. But that's not really happening. So, you know, this is one of these circularity 3D printing looks very easy with additive. It looks like, oh, we can totally do this. But actually making qualified parts that work and actually managing those materials over the lifetime of the material, or managing a part over its entire 10, 20-year lifespan is actually really difficult. Do you guys have ideas how we could do circularity, how we could implement things like that in additive or with additive?
Maybe, I think one of the oldest technology of AM is the cladding process. So, and we can use especially the cladding for repairing parts, and it's already done. So for the turbine blades, it's already established to repair them, instead of wasting them. So this is one small thing that we maybe can do. And again, with the powder, there are also some first companies coming up, buying the old powder, refresh it or reuse it to bring it back into the process chain. Yeah. So there are some small things already going on.
Yeah. But do you guys buy, because the dream scenario for me would be, like, for example, we make eyeglasses, then end of life, they come back, or if they break, they get returned to the optometrist, whatever. Then they get ground up and they get turned into a car bumper. Then the car bumper gets returned by Volkswagen, gets ground up, and it gets turned into like a filler for a dashboard. Do you believe in that kind of managing materials, like through multiple life cycles? Because what I always worry about is, like, there's always in polymers, for example, there's always degradation if we recycle it. And we always have to put in virgin material, and it always degrades. So we can't just keep making eyeglasses out of eyeglasses. That's a fantasy. So do you guys believe in stuff like this, that we can manage materials through different lifespans, different companies, or things like that? Or?
I mean, I believe it's a big challenge. It's not easy, but of course there are several initiatives. What we have kicked off is, for instance, coming from the parts, what you mentioned. So I'd really try to get the parts back at least to granules, that we can at least use it for injection molding. This is probably visible. This is not that difficult. The same is then how to come from the powder back to granules. This probably is also manageable. But then, of course, the tricky part is how to come back from the powder to monomers, that we can maybe reuse it in 3D printing. And this, of course, is not an easy topic. I mean, we can partly do it, probably with a refresh rate increase, but I don't think at the moment that we can do it 100%. So we need to really do more research there. But this has to be the clear target. And also there are really a lot of initiatives in the metal space, also in the metal powder that, there's of course the waste much less, but still there is something what we can improve and then we can recycle and bring it back to the life, to the printers again, and this is definitely going very good forward. I think there's a success faster done, but I mean, all of us, and I fully agree what you said, we need to take care of the parts and all the powders what we use today in manufacturing, that we can reuse it instead of using always new and new resources from our earth.
But we should also be a bit careful, because we already had many discussions concerning recycling of materials. And if you talk about recycling of materials in the additive manufacturing sector, people usually talk about the reuse of the powder which was not used in the building process. Is that really recycling? If you try to tell your grandmother about that, she would never consider that as recycling. Because on the other side, we say we need less material. We can, of course, reuse the powder, which is partly a lie. We have to work on that, but we should be really careful to tell people that this is sustainable. Yeah? Otherwise, they would look at us and would say that's ridiculous. Yeah, so we really have to think about how can we reuse parts. And I know some companies who are already working on that. Like, for instance, Works from California. They can make powder out of a tank. That was their start, which is really interesting. There's another company in Germany reusing all these. You all know this. If you have a desktop printer, sometimes in the morning you will find spaghetti. What do you do with the spaghetti? So you send it to the startup Recycling Fabrik, it's the name, to Braunschweig, and they make new materials out of that, new filament. And they have really great names, great marketing. They call it Smashed Unicorn, because the colors are mixed a bit. Yeah? But we really have to think about what can we do with the materials, what can we do with the parts, and we are at the absolute beginning. So you just mentioned that finding the numbers and data for life cycle assessment, big word in those circles. We are far away from life cycle assessments. It's really hard to find the data, but we have to proceed in that direction, definitely.
I think that's an interesting point, because I've tried to do similar things for clients and stuff like that, and there just isn't a lot of data available on materials, where they come from, how you use it after the fact, what the actual process energy and all these things. And it complicates when people do buy-to-fly calculations, but it also complicates when we actually try to figure out like how sustainable is it. So what would we need, for example, for this life cycle assessment? What is the stuff that we're really missing? What's the kind of things that are we missing, like a lot? Is it like everything? Is it like, or a few things, or?
When we started with AMGTA, we had a working group on also with this idea. And we try to bring in some data. And if you ask big corporates, and no matter whether those are train companies or automotive companies, and they all have problems to prove where do those parts, and sometimes they are in the company for decades. Yeah? No one has the data, what happened during that time. And so we first have to start with collecting those data. We haven't started yet. People who are really honest would not at that point. Yeah. So, but we still have to do this.
Yeah.
Big data.
Well, and I think one of the challenges around that too is providing the data, right? Is getting, if you're trying to do a life cycle assessment, trying to get primary data upstream or downstream. Companies don't want to share that data because everybody thinks they have their secret sauce, their information that they can't share. And they think they have about this much information they can't share. Really, they have about this much information that they can't share that really is proprietary. And I think if you're a printer manufacturer, if you're a powder manufacturer and you're concerned about putting out that, that information because your process happens to take a lot of energy, you're kind of missing the point that this is a much bigger value stream than that. Yeah, it does take a lot of energy to produce the powder, but it enables this amazingly, potentially very sustainable process. So it's sort of like the little bit of investment up front and a much better process. So I think being willing to share that information, I know the research that we're funding and commissioning, getting those companies on board so you're not trying to get primary data from another company. Have them on board as part of the project that really demonstrates the entire value, the entire life cycle is really helpful. But getting that data is really difficult, but it's really necessary for us to really be able to tell a full story and move it forward.
Okay, that's good. There was a question also from the audience. What about materials? Do you have some examples of sustainable materials? Which I think Stefanie came up with a wonderful one. Now, this is also a really interesting one because it's like sometimes we have bio-based materials. Real Son is, I think, the most famous. We also have PLA, which on the material extrusion side is actually a really problematic material. It's really difficult to recycle. You need dedicated compounding, composting facilities to take care of it. It uses 7 liters of water, and it comes from a food source material, right? But every user of a desktop printer thinks that PLA is the greenest thing that ever happened. So, where do you guys do you see answers? I mean, there's recycled materials. There's materials made from recycled 3D printing materials. Then there's also bio-based ones. And there's also like kind of lower impact materials as well. Like other companies are coming up with that, where it's saying this is made with green energy or something like that. Do you think that just seems like a menu? Or is there like or are there is one superior to the other one? Or do you have favorites in these materials or examples? Very broadly, I think.
Maybe to comment on this, I think we at EOS, for instance, what we do, we have a bio-based material, so it's called P11. Yeah? Of course, this is known. I think this is a good answer, a good first step. But beside this one, we have also introduced the P12 material, which is carbon reduced or carbon neutral. These are small bits in the beginning, but I think all these small things you need to collect and get started. Yeah? I think this is the first good trend to say, okay, we can at least take care of the CO2 emission in a certain degree, and then from that we take it to new materials and get better at the same time. Because the abilities, and this I wanted to say what we said before, if you think about now the waste and the materials, what you said, but if you go just back to yesterday to the Just Airtech case, the benefit what you can create with design and with these materials. Take this Just Airtech case, if you take this heat exchanger, then you save around factor 5 in CO2 emission to conventional technologies and factor 5 in the topic of energy consumption. So this we should not forget what we have savings if maybe have a bigger construction area on the waste, but on the other side we have also benefits. I think we should always compare both together.
Yeah, I think so. And I've got a question. You guys get a lot of funded research. You're trying to make, is there like a lot of research happening in recycling machines or recycling devices? Or, you would think that a person, like the easiest example I can come up with is a university using all the PET bottles to make filament. And is there a lot of demand for that kind of project or that kind of device? Or are you saying that when people are actually putting up their money say, I want this? Or
Yeah, there I have to be honest,
Yeah.
that was not yet a topic of our institute.
Yeah.
So we were focusing on other sustainability topics, and you mentioned the public funding. So in every public funded project, you have to explain which influencing factor you will have with this project on the topic of sustainability. So there, it is always a big topic, but not that what you mentioned. But
Okay.
all our projects try to be more sustainable.
And would you think that, because that could be, it sounds like a wonderful product, right? Just like a recycling machine for all your powder or all your, and other stuff is like really, the powder one's really easy because you just throw it in like a pelletizer and you get filament out. So that's really easy. But I still think people aren't doing this, you started about like, talking about the simple stuff, the low-hanging fruit kind of, but people aren't really undertaking that. There's no entrepreneurial drive, it seems, to make materials and sell materials, but not for these recycling systems. Do you think that's like it's a solution maybe, or is that just not something it's worth? Because it seems like a wonderful market, right? As well, just as a as a business.
I think it would be a great idea if all the companies who are in the recycling industry are part of the development in the R&D, because they have the knowledge which materials do you, or how can you separate them from each other, which materials are good in the recycling process and which not. And we are waiting until the product is ready or in the market, and then we are thinking about how can we bring this back, how can we use it, and it's too late because we don't start at the beginning. What can we do afterwards? Because then we can make the right decision in the moment of creating. Afterwards, it's too late, and that's where we are at the moment. But to start there now is also too late. We have to start now in the beginning, in the process, when we start about thinking which product do we need, what can AM do, how can we bring AM as a solution into the market, and what's the next step, what's after the usage, what's the next case. And for this, we have to make discussions like this, but also have the round tables and the corporates or wherever with all the supply chain actors and get this trust. It's also with the data, right? We need the data and we are collecting that data, but you need a trust that you share all the information for the overall aim, and not only for yourself. And then it's a big business case for all of us.
Okay.
And at MGA, we are at the moment working, we have an ecological sustainability working group, and we're talking also about LCAs, but there's no real standard in AM for LCAs. Yeah? what is the compromise we are all working for? So what is the aim? And this is what we now want to define. And Christian Bay, he's the leader of the working group. He's also around, so who might be interested, that's also a good topic.
Okay. And so if we look a little bit broader, so we've talked about this we have a question also from the audience about like the post-processing is very resource intensive specifically. So I think we all are talking about the entire value chain from material manufacturing, monomer even, or mining, right, all the way down to what we do end of life of parts. So whose responsibility is it? Right? Who do we talk to? We all have to work together. Do we all have to make some kind of compact to work together, or do we all, or is it just the user that has to be responsible? Is it the person that makes the part because they're the ones that are going to own this, or who's responsible? Who's going to take initiative on this entire value chains?
From my experience, the big OEMs have to push the market.
Yeah.
So they have to force the market. This is what we are doing in the rail industry at the moment. And but I can just tell you, be prepared, because they will. No matter whether this is automotive or aerospace or whatever sector, they will be forced, again, also by the European Commission. The European Commission asks in future about the material compass. Yeah? So you have to provide the information, because the big OEMs will ask you, and this will not take very long again. So.
Okay, so that would mean that we get a more traceable, more trackable kind of thing forced upon us, maybe. I think there's also, is there also like, there's a question in the audience, and it's about how is sustainability sellable when production with AM is more expensive? I'd like to turn it around and say, well, besides just the stick that the European Union is hitting us with, are there real advantages besides just the greenwashing, nice PR? Like, can we be more successful with green products? Is that a way to do this? Can we sell green products for more value? And does that mean that we can then, finance the green thing by ourselves through just selling these green products? Or is this just a cost center? Is this a cost center we all have to deal with and get over it?
I think if you're looking at just that it's a more expensive part potentially to make, I think you're kind of missing the bigger picture. Like when we talk about things like overstocking or distribution or warehousing of parts. I mean, if you're just looking at, we have to do the part-for-part comparison. That's really important. People want to know, they want to quantify from an economic standpoint, a sustainability standpoint, what does it take to produce this same part or component two different ways. But really understanding how it fits into a business, like Würth is trying to achieve a business objective, and how does this really go through their entire, what's the business impact? What does this enable them to do? I think you really have to look at that whole thing, because if you're trying to tell somebody they have to pick economics over sustainability, no one's interested in taking their medicine. Now, you may get regulations or customer demand that sort of forces you to take your medicine, but if you understand how sustainability tracks with economic viability, then it is not an uphill battle. And if you're not seeing that, you probably just need to zoom out a little bit more, because when you say, okay, it may cost more to produce this part, but what is the part enabling? At some point when we look at something like electric flight, something like that's only going to be possible with additive manufacturing. And it won't be about what was the energy required to produce this part. It will be that this part enabled electric flight. And so being able to see that bigger story, does this enable us to get a wind turbine up and going a day sooner, so we're not getting power from a coal plant? What is this enabling the business to do is where we're really going to see the viability. And then it's not a matter of how much energy did it take necessarily just to produce the part, but seeing the entire picture and understanding that, and it makes for we're not talking about an uphill battle. We're not picking money over sustainability. They track together. If you're saving energy, you're saving material, you're saving warehousing, to warehouse and air-conditioned parts for 3 years just so you can go throw them away eventually. If you don't have that as part of the equation, especially when you're talking to your customers, you are really missing a big part of the story and really being able to explain and not cherry picking. I'm not talking about trying to put a rosy picture on this. There's clearly challenges that are being worked on. You know, this is, again, we're in a very innovative space. Where this is exactly going, we don't know. But understanding that big picture and really talking about that big picture and finding out where are the areas we really need to work on and where does the innovation go and how do we make a business case for it. Recycling, if there's not a business case for it, you know, who's going to invest in that? But we create the business case and things like, you know, like you said, you can't wait till, you know, the end of life and now go, okay, what was this made out of? Now what do we do with it? Well, we start with maybe we produce it from something that we know will be recyclable at the end, and we make those decisions up front. So it's a very big discussion.
Yeah, Mark?
Maybe to build on to what you said, one concrete case. So there is a project we're running, it's about an air conditioning unit, yeah? And what you just said, so the air conditioning unit itself, with additive heat exchangers inside, will be 50% more expensive than the traditional air conditioning unit. But the energy consumption and the energy reduction, what you do, and energy cost reduction you do, after 2 years, you know, the let's say 50% higher costs already substituted. So that means even if the product is more expensive, we all save a lot of energy, and also the client itself, after 2 years, is refinanced the higher cost. And you know, this is exactly what I think we feel we'll see a lot in this special green environmental applications. Well, the part might be more expensive, but the benefit we all have is really, really big. And I think this we should really consider as a very big advantage from our industry.
And one of the most topical, I think we touched on it a couple of times, a few of you have, like, it's about this overstock idea and this digital warehouse on the one hand. Sherri mentioned it already. It's a beautiful idea. We free up billions in free cash flow. We can put that in the business or profit or shareholders. We can do whatever we want with it because we don't have to keep these parts for a decade. Because sometimes it's a decade or sometimes it's 30 years in case of some train stuff. And then we have the magical digital warehouse and we'll all print out the parts just when we need them. So yeah, how realistic is this? Because it sounds wonderful, but I think actually it might be a little bit more complicated, I think, in reality to do something like this.
Yeah. So many of our customers asked for the fully digital warehouse, but to be honest, I think it's not realistic. Maybe we have to ask Stefanie later, she's doing that. But there's always just this proportion of parts which can be really printed because the material is available or the part fits into the printer and so on. But maybe also this amount of material can make already a bit of a difference. And I think we have to work on all these topics to make it possible. Maybe Stefanie, you can explain if it's realistic or not.
I'm absolutely convinced that to a certain extent it's realistic and we have to work on this. Is it easy? No, not at all. Yeah? So, for instance, we also work on rubber components because rubber components are quite interesting to additive manufacturing. If you want to use them in train systems and they are safety relevant, you have to throw them away after 3 years. If they are not safety relevant, you can keep them 6 years. A train goes into a big overhaul every 6 years. Wow. So I have to throw parts away. Unfortunately, we do not have any air conditioning system in our warehouse, but still the point is right, Sherri. This is really a big topic we want to work on, and this is $1 million business just for rubber components, and this is so much out of woo. And so at the moment we try to identify what are the main parts which are mobility critical, as we call them. So why do we have a standstill or a potential standstill because parts are missing? And of course those are not little plastic hangers for coats. That was a piece we started with. So usually those are metal components. And sometimes those are very big metal components. And just recently, we printed a motor housing, 570 kilograms of stainless steel. No, we didn't print it, no worries. We couldn't afford that. But we printed the sand molds. And so we have to think with a big intelligence, what are the sufficient technologies who help us to bring all those parts in a digital warehouse? And this is not just one technology. Yeah? At the moment, we work with a dozen technologies at Deutsche Bahn. And also the other railway companies, by the way. I'm not just talking for one. In our network, we have 7 European railway companies. And of course, they have all the same challenges, and they nearly have all the same parts and same materials. So it's really worth thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think it's a good point. So if we're looking at this, it's like, we've talked about like kind of stock and the digital warehouse. I like that we're not very utopian about this, because it is really, really complex. I've been on projects where we try to define which parts are 3D printable. It maybe one in 1,000 or something like that. Depends on the company. And usually my heuristic was always like, let's start with your most expensive parts, and then we can maybe make it work. And then most expensive parts that are smaller than a bread box, and then maybe we can start somewhere, right? So it was actually a very small percentage. But I think it's interesting that something that Sherri said is about this inventing quicker. And getting to market quicker. We're always talking about this time compression idea, this idea of failing quicker with additive. You know, so can we accelerate sustainability by just replacing goods quicker and inventing better solutions? Is that really kind of something that you see happening, that we kind of like implement things better, or implement, do away with the old quicker with additive and usher in a more sustainable world? Is that realistic, or kind of utopian, or? I think it's utopian. I think no one's gonna. But what do you guys think about, like, where should we go with the sustainable? We're about nearing the end of our panel here. What do you hope, if we do this again in 5 years or something? What do you hope that we have achieved as an industry in the interim? What are your goals that you would like personally, or you would like for our industry, that you really hope that we could get there in let's say a concrete time period, like 5 years or something like that? What do you guys hope where we would go?
I would say, I think if we have a better understanding from the manufacturers, the end users of AM, of what they need, and they understand the potential of AM better, that will inform the development side in terms of the equipment and the capabilities, the software, the materials that are needed. So I think, bringing all of those people together in forums like this, and every opportunity to have those conversations and for that information to go back and forth. But I think realistic approaches to what, how do we get there? For many businesses, it will really be about reimagining how they do business. And I think, like when we talk about the overstock thing, we tend to talk about AM being on demand, as in, I need this part right now, print the part for me right now. But there's this is a big, spectrum here, from having to produce 100,000 of a part or producing one when you want it. It may not be on demand. It may just be nearer demand. I think the pandemic showed us that having no inventory on the shelf and thinking you can get it overnight might not happen. But you may not have to have a warehouse full. You may have to have 10 of these parts on the shelf, or 100 or 1,000. So, finding that middle ground. But I think as the technologies develop, the recycling, the materials, I think all of that is really rapidly developing as we see what's working, what's connecting with manufacturers who are really using this. I think that will drive a lot of this innovation. I think there's going to be just amazing innovation in the capabilities, what we're going to do, and what that's going to lead to in terms of sustainability.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to jump in on this? Or Carina? Yeah?
It would be nice if we could sit here in 5 years all together, and together with the customers, because that's what you asked about. How can we bring it in the process of them? So why do we not talk to them and ask them, how can we help you with AM? What's your problem? Directly here, not with just us. And on the other side, with all the others in the process directly. And we have to, not all, it's every time the same, like in corporates, finance, product departments, purchasing, all of them are separated in their bubble. And everyone is complaining, why is this one not waiting for me, why does he not ask me, and so on and so on. Or complaining about a customer could also be, just bring them all together in one room and have the discussion.
Sounds wonderful. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you enjoyed this panel. I thought it was really nice, actually. I think we got on some more realism. I think we got some more insights about that it is going to be difficult, that we do have to work with a lot of people, and that it's going to be an uphill struggle. And I think that's a good assessment. Usually these kind of things end with like a little bit of a kumbaya, everything's solved. And I don't want to leave you with this a feeling that everything's solved and taken care of. I want to give you a sense of urgency and a sense of like that there's actually a lot to be won, either financially or in your own personal success with making sustainability your success and the success of us all. I'd like to thank everyone for your attention and thank this wonderful panel for doing a great job. I thought it was really wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone.